history with this one. Apparently, with New Moon, it was supposed to be called Forever Dawn or something like that. It was supposed to be like a little epilogue because Twilight was supposed to be like a one-off for Myers and all that. But apparently, in 2005, when this book came out, it was pretty. It was a pretty big, huge thing for a lot of readers, especially the teen girls. So yeah, I guess she decided, you know what, it's time to pump this crap out and make some more money. I mean, explore the story. Yes, as I originally told it. Yes, precisely. And let me just say before I get into, the actual story here, actually a couple things. First of all, Myers as a writer, not as bad as people say she is. That being said, these books can use like a ton of rewrites. But overall, the basic gist of a story could be reamed from these books, sort of. I can see a really good, decent story in this book series up until this point, but there are some problematic issues, very problematic issues that need to be addressed. But yes, overall, the story could be decent enough. That being said, part two, my second little thing here. If you thought this was a reinterpretation of the Romeo and Juliet story that's been pretty prevalent throughout space and time for all love stories told, period, oh, get ready, because we're getting into more Romeo and Juliet. Oh yeah. So apparently a few months have passed since the events of Twilight, and Bella and Edward, they're trying to make it real, they're trying to keep it loose, keep it hanging, But apparently Bella is, having nightmares of turning 18 and being older than Edward. And because of that, she really wants to be turned into a vampire so they can live together forever at the same age. But Edward is denying her and constantly telling her, no. Okay. But then, Edward's family decides to give Bella a birthday party, if you will. And seriously, the funniest thing in the entire, ironically, the funniest thing in the entire saga up to this point happens. And I gotta admit, when I read this, I almost just cracked up laughing considerably. So when she's opening up her presents, she gets a paper cut, right? And guess what? It's bleeding. So what's gonna happen? Edward's brother Jasper comes over and just started lunging at her and is like, blood. Edward fends him off. And then she gets, hurt more in the process, which I gotta say, when that happened, I was like, oh, what did you expect? How do you, what? She isn't hiding or anything. She's just showing it for the world to see. But only Jasper, only one vampire gets triggered off this. No one else. Okay, fine. But in the book, it literally comes out of nowhere, and it's just absolutely hilarious. I'm sorry. It's during this that we find out that Edward doesn't want to turn Bella into a vampire because he doesn't think that vampires have souls, and he doesn't want Bella to not spend eternity without a soul. So there you go, I guess. And then, after all that, Edward's like, okay, it's gone far enough. I'm done. I don't want you to get hurt. Goodbye. So yeah, he bogs out, takes his family with him, and leaves town. So yeah, there's that. Now, here's the thing, too. If you are triggered by any, self-harm or anything like that, or, the S word or whatever, please skip this part of the video because there's a lot. probably not a good message for people who could, be receptible to these types of things, especially young teenage girls. But, if you are triggered, please just take care of yourself, and all that. Skip this part of the video and, yeah. Anyway, Bella is so distraught from losing Edward that she starts doing these reckless things, trying to, permanently off herself, if you will. There's the time when she's lost in the forest and the search party has to find her and all that. And if she does reckless things, apparently Edward's spirit will appear and she can, get close to him again. So she does reckless stuff trying to off herself and so she can see the spirit of Edward and hear his voice. I'm not even joking when I'm saying this, but this is truly just terrible. This is literally the worst thing this entire franchise has done up to this point. Wow. Okay. And to, kind of intensify this, she gets her hands on some motorcycles and all that. And, who's a gearhead but our dear friend Jacob? Yes, the man, the myth, the legend. He returns. He gears up the motorcycles and all that. Apparently, he has a infatuation with Bella. No, my guy, don't. She's way too good for you, but whatever. And apparently, Bella is also like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Maybe Jacob is actually a good person to hang around with because he's cheerful and he's, good-natured and all that. What? I didn't even know people could be like that. But apparently, it's a quote-unquote only sisterly love because her one true love is none of that crap. So there you go. And, her dad's, warning her about the giant bear wolves in the woods and all that. And, then Jacob's like, hey, don't be with this gang or whatever. They do kind of reckless stuff and all that. But apparently they're like, good people and all that. They're not like, terrible. They're good community people and all that, helping the community out and all that. So which is actually, it's like a pretty good thing. It's like a good thing. But apparently with, the leader Sam, which I gotta say, this is probably the worst Sam ever in the history of media, but, who's actually a bad guy. If you know. Anyway, so Sam, he gets, apparently people change whenever he's, get around him and kind of becomes part of their lackeys and all that. But Jacob is all like, that won't happen to me. But then it happens to him, and then, Bella starts to stalk him because Jacob starts avoiding her as well. Because, of course, when you avoid the women that you love, eventually they will come around to you. I don't know. I don't know. But apparently, I guess they find out in the meadow where, Edward takes his shirt off and shows Bella as being, Bella, he's sparkly or whatever. Apparently, there's this other vampire that tried to eat her and all that, but from the first book, who says that, apparently, there's other vampires that are trying to eat her, but he came, fast to, kind of stop them, kind of warn her and all that, but apparently he skipped breakfast, so guess who's on the menu? But then the wolves come around and start to, trashing the vampire up and all that, and, so apparently she goes around and confronts Jacob and all that, but apparently he is the werewolf. Yes, we find out Jacob is a werewolf, and the reason why he's been hanging out with these crazy shenanigan people is because he has to take up arms and fight the vampires because that's just how it is, I guess. Also, another trigger warning because this once again, more talk of the S word happens. So, if you get triggered again, just skip this part of the video too, I guess. But anyway, Bella tries to throw herself off the cliff for some reason. Not really a whole lot to really talk about there. She just does because she can't get she's very torn between her love of Jacob and, Edward and all that. So she decides to jump off a cliff. Yeah. After the werewolves decide to protect her from the vampires that are trying to take her. Yeah. So Jacob, loves to take his shirt off. So he takes his shirt off and, runs over, swims over and helps her out and all that. And apparently, there's this other vampire that can see into the future or whatever and sees that she threw herself off a cliff and all that. And, so apparently, she just want to make sure that she's okay and whatever, and Bella's fine, and the other vampire's like, oh yeah, okay, so Edward is about to kill himself. What? Yeah, he's about to turn himself into the Ventari over here, and he's going to show himself to humans, and then the vampires have legal right to, kill him and all that. So she runs and she runs and she runs and she saves him just in the nick of time and all that. And Edward's like, oh, you should have known I was doing this just because I love you. And so roasted, I guess. And then Jacob's like, oh yeah, well, if you turn her into a vampire, that breaks the werewolf and vampire truce, and we'll be coming after you and all that. So yeah, that's it. This is the most... Oh gosh. If you thought the first book was problematic, my gosh, this one... Oh no, this one's far, far, far worse. In the first one, she actually, has a character. This one, she's just pawning all over Edward to the point where she can't, quote unquote, survive without him. So she has to do these things in order to, get closer to him. No, that's a terrible message for kids, especially teenage girls. No, don't do that. Also, it has a bad reference toward, therapy, because Bella's father mentions that she should probably go to therapy, because she's doing all this stuff. And she's like, no, I'm going to be put in a straitjacket if they actually told everybody what's inside my mind and all that. And I'm just like, no, not really. You wouldn't be. No. Bad message. Bad. I don't think I really have to go into this, but, doing everything and anything for your mental health is probably the best thing you can do. Therapy is very, very beneficial. If you need therapy, please go get therapy. But no, that's a terrible message. Also, while I was reading this book, I couldn't help but kind of think about history, specifically. Vampires against werewolves, yeah, it's fun and all good and all that, but we find out that the werewolves are basically Native Americans, mostly all of them, not necessarily all of them, as we see in the movies, but most of them are Native American, of Native American descent, and vampires are very palish white. In fact, the whitest people in all time. And there's a struggle. Oh boy. So I'm not going to get into that, but that's very problematic. That's a big red flag. Yeah. And worst thing about this book, with all the, terrible messages and terrible racial things here too, it's just so boring. It has roughly the same amount of pages as the first book, but barely anything happens. I just tell you, the highlights because, yeah, you can honestly fit every plot point into like 20 pages. It's fleshed out in 500. Yeah. And of course, someone's going to be like, oh, well, actually, this is actually an allegory for, teenage angst or whatever. And, Stephanie Meyer had this happen in real life, so he kind of transferred over here. Now, I don't care. There's a lot of terrible messages in this book that teenage girls should not read, let alone any teenager should read at all, okay? No, this is at the bottom of the list, obviously. Yeah, the first one had terrible messages, but at least you can sort of, kind of, gloss over it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a teenager of any sort reading it, but at least there was one big glaring issue as opposed to like 5. And by the way, even with this book, I get it. You know, I went through a terrible breakup too, like a couple of them actually, and if I read this book, it maybe would give me some catharsis. I know there's some people out there that it did give some good cathartic messages and all that, like saying, hey, you're going through a hard time. It's all good, you know? But still, there is some terrible messages in here, like, I don't know, trying to off yourself to be closer to your mate or what you know should be your mates, using other people and all that. You know, No, I'm sorry. This book is terrible. I wouldn't necessarily put it, galaxies, below Twilight or whatever, but it's planets away. It's planets away, let me tell you.